Hello. Slightly different video, but this really applies to specifically what I like about the game and the kind of content that I usually end up focusing on, and that is Mythic Plus. So Mythic Plus has been in a pretty rough state this expansion. I have not had too much fun with M Plus since probably Shadowlands. And I think that's just because I like the dungeons so much, and that's when I was really pushing myself. But ever since then, it's just been really hard to push myself back up to that point and stay motivated to pug, especially because the majority of my keys that I've done since Mythic Plus was launched has been pug keys. I enjoy pugging. I like playing with a group, and I plan to play with a group in the future, like if for things like title and whatnot for future seasons. But the idea of pugging is what I enjoy about the game because it's so, like, the idea of it being accessible is what I like. So they just announced some M Plus changes, and I have been actually considering making a video just about like what I want changed in M Plus. And then this happened, so I'd like to talk about these changes and then still talk about how I feel about it, and also just kind of ramble about potential changes I'd still like to see going forward. So first off, let's just talk about the changes themselves, and then I'll give my opinions and stuff. So the first thing is Gilded Crests being available from 7s. This is totally fine, whatever, it's just easier to get Gilded Crests. Hero Track gear is available from 6s, so this doesn't really change too much because right now you get Hero Track gear from 7s, but then you don't start getting Gilded Crests until 8s. So it's just lowering that, I guess, by a tiny bit. It doesn't really affect me in any way. Mythic Zeros drop champion gear and are also on a weekly lockout now instead of a daily lockout, I believe. So Mythic Zeros are going to be more of like a entry level, I guess, like weekly way to get gear when a new patch drops and stuff like that. So we'll see how that feels in like the first couple weeks. I also could have been misreading about the weekly lockout thing. But that's what it seemed like it was going to be, is just M0 is going to be more relevant at the start, but you're not going to be able to get as much out of it right off the bat, but it's going to be better, like higher quality gear, basically. And you're not going to have to log in every day in order to get, benefits. Okay, so then the next thing is Tyrannical and Fortified moved to level 7 and 10, and Challenger's Peril removed. Challenger's Peril was the thing where when you die, I believe it was at plus 10 and higher. When you die, it subtracts 15 seconds off the timer. This is getting moved, so it's not completely removed. And then instead of Fortified being at 4 and 7, I believe it is, it's at 7 and 10. So again, not a huge change or anything like that. And then we have Guile at plus 12 includes the effects of Challenger's Peril instead of additional stats. So this means that huge gap that you see when you go from, 2 chesting 11s into not even being able to time a plus 12, even when you have like minimal deaths and stuff. This is going to change that and just make it to where that time loss when you die is on 12s and higher, which is good because those are considered, where you start pushing keys. And then we're going to not have the additional stats, which is like every key level, you get 10% extra damage and health on all of the mobs in the dungeon. And what happened is when you went from 11 to 12, it raised it up, for instance, like 20% because it did the 10% from the level of going from 11 to 12. But then also there was this additional affix, which was the Guile, which would increase the stats even further. So you're like doubling down on the stat increase and like jumping, substantially in the terms of like what stats the mobs have and stuff. So this will make that a lot smoother. It'll just feel like you're going from an 11 to a 12, and now your deaths have more impact on the key timer and stuff like that. Other than this, one of the major updates that pretty much made me start recording this is at 12 plus keys. Keys cannot deplete past the level once you've timed every dungeon at that difficulty. Time all 13s, keys cannot deplete past 13. So originally this change came in and was just at, once you've gotten the, I believe it was like the 2800 or the 2850 achievement or something along those lines. Like once you time all 12s, your keys can no longer deplete lower than 12. Like, you always will have a 12, and if you deplete the 12, it'll just stay at 12, which was okay. It was a nice little quality of life thing, but for anyone pushing keys, it was completely irrelevant, especially depending on the level that you're pushing. Because say you're pushing, you know, for instance, right now on live, I'm trying to pug like into 15s and 16s. So say I have my key in my bags and I'm trying to pug it and I want to do 15s and 16s. I deplete it, you know, twice and it's down to a 13, and then I deplete it again and it's down to a 12, and then in the new season that just means I get to keep that 12, which at that point that key's dead. I'm not gonna like rerun it. A majority of the time I'm done with that key and I'm just gonna try other stuff because that's too many levels to try to push back up to get it back up to a 15. But now this change makes it a lot more relevant for everyone, where once you time, say, you know, like right now on live, I have all 14s timed, and I only have 2 more 14s to do before I have all 15s. So right now on live, if this was live, I would not be able to go below a 14, like in terms of my own key. So right now I have like a 15 Grim Batol in my bags. If I go and try that 15 Grim Batol and it depletes, it's a 14 Grim Batol, and now I try that 14 Grim Batol and it depletes again, it stays 14, and I can keep retrying that 14 to then fix it and put it back up to a 15, rather than, you know, it depletes 3 levels and then I have to do, you know, 3 pug groups, which then takes a couple hours, which then you know might fail again, and so on and so forth. So it makes it much more relevant to where your key will stay in at least your general range of being able to always be recoverable, is the idea. There are some instances where people are doing like, you know, this is going to be kind of unfortunate because there are certain instances where people are doing like 16s, but then they still have like a 14 Grim Batol times. Like they just haven't done a Grim Batol, but they've done every other dungeon on like 15, 16, and even a couple 17s like on Mist and Arakara and stuff. So that sort of thing will really suck because then they have to get that Grim Batol done in order to change that. So I wish it was more like IO oriented. But I guess we'll just have to kind of see how it pans out in the future. This is where I want to bring up... Oh, and then the last thing before we talk about other stuff. The 2850 mount that they announced is being moved up to 3000. I think this is a great change. I think the 2850 mount in general was already a great change, or a great addition, because right now I think a really big problem in M+ is the fact that there's not much to go off of besides you get the mount at 2500 or whatever it is, and then after that there's really no reason. I guess you have portals, so you get portals and the mount, you kind of get those hand in hand, and then after that there's nothing really incentivizing you to push past that point besides just IO. And so what a lot of people do is, because people like to make some kind of actual goal that they can set their eyes on and like actually view or see in game. So a lot of people will say, okay, well, I'm going to push for title. So then they push for the Mythic Plus title, and the Mythic Plus title only goes to the top 0.1% of players. So it's very unlikely that that's a reasonable goal for a lot of people. Like, it's not realistic because there's not that many people who can get it. So it makes it to where people are going from, okay, I got all my portals, to, okay, now I'm going to do 12s, and then it's like, okay, well, now I've gotten into high keys. The next step, I guess, is the Mythic Plus title, which is just crazy because that's such a huge... The gap between people who time all 12s and the people who are doing Mythic Plus title is absolutely insane. Like, it is a totally different game. So making more rewards, even if they're cosmetic, and they should be cosmetic, in between that gap of all plus 12s to title range will be really, really beneficial. And this starts that. By 3000 IO, I think you have mostly 13s timed. Maybe, I think it's all 13s across the board. I could be wrong about that. So just making more things to where it's like, okay, now, you know, you do all 15s and you get this, you know, you get the tier set of this season is a different color, or, you know, you get a weapon enchant that is like a transmog, like something like that. I think offering more and more rewards like that in between will help people set goals for themselves and not feel super disappointed when they try to push for title and can't reach it, and then they just feel like they wasted a bunch of time trying to get really, really good at M+, and there was nothing to show for it besides, you know, IO for a few months, and then it goes away and no one ever sees it again. On the topic of, I'm not going to try to drag this on too long, but on the topic of the keys not depleting, I think this is a huge, huge improvement, and we're in the right direction as far as where we should be going. But I do think there are still ways to improve this. The fact that keys are still RNG of which ones you get every time is not okay. I do not think it is sustainable or it is good for the health of the game in general, especially in a world where we have to pug so much. It's not fun. So I recently played, I guess not recently, but in winter of last year, I played the Fellowship Alpha, which if you guys haven't heard of that, it's just a game that's coming out. It's basically the only other game that's been that's copied like the M+ formula and tried to, you know, put their own spin on it. So it's a game entirely revolving around Mythic Plus. Like that is the game. Is you log in and you do Mythic Plus. There's no raids at the moment or anything like that. It's literally just, there's no leveling, there's no MMO aspect. It's just you log in, you pick a character, and you do M+ with, you know, 3 other people. What I liked about that system that they had in there, and I pushed pretty high keys in the open or the closed alpha, is the fact that they just had a mission board that you'd go to. You go to the mission board, you have the party leader, they can access the mission board, so the party leader walks up to it, and then they pick the dungeon that they want to go to, and then they choose the level that they want to do. And the difference is, because there's a couple key aspects here, the first thing is that you get to pick a level based on what you've completed. So once you do so I'll break this into like WoW terms, like if this was in WoW, you go up to the mission table, you select, say, Grimbatol, like right now I need a 15 Grimbatol in retail, but I only have a 12 Grimbatol timed in retail. So it's only going to let me do a 13. And the reason for that, I broke that down really poorly, but it basically lets you queue up for one level higher than what you've timed on that key. So you can pick whatever key you want, but the level is based on what the party leader has completed so far. So if they've done a plus 13 in time, they get to queue up for a 14 if they want, or up to a 14. So for me, in live, I've done a 14 Grimbatol, and I want a 15, so it lets me just go up to the mission table, make a group, and then queue up for a 15 Grimbatol. It doesn't matter what my party members have as far as requirements or anything like that, because I chose to bring them into the group. It's whatever the party leader is, and they get to just pick the key and the level as long as they've timed that key one level lower than what they're queuing up for. And this makes it way more sustainable in terms of pugging, because it allows you not only to target the dungeons that you want, but also it lets you retry them. So when you say I have this 15 Grimbatol in my bags right now on retail that I'm going to go try, I don't time it and we deplete it to a 14. Now when I do that 14 Grimbatol, it's not IO for me, and now it just re-rolls into a 15 of a dungeon that I've already done 100 times, and now I have to go do that. And I'm just like sitting there running keys over and over, fishing for another 15 Grimbatol rather than being able to try again. And then I spend, 5 hours trying to get a 15 Grimbatol, and I finally get it. And then now I go and run it again, and it depletes in, 30 seconds on the first pull. And it's just like, it's really, really disheartening to have to do that and to go through all of those hoops just to get an attempt with random strangers. So having a system where you can just pick the dungeon or target a certain key, like something like that, and not have this RNG system where your key just randomly rolls into different things, I think would be hugely, hugely beneficial. So yeah, that is the changes. There's a full list of changes. I'll leave a link to this in the description or in like a pinned comment probably. But I just wanted to go over the summary of things and my thoughts, my initial thoughts on it, and how I still think that we could improve on this, which is basically the RNG element of what key you have and what keys you get. I think we really need to try to be able to target stuff better in terms of what we want, because it will allow people, especially people that pug, which is the overwhelming majority of players who do M+ are pugging. It allows them to just have more agency in what they're spending their time on, which that's why so many like high key push groups and stuff like that, in pugs die is because people don't want to sit in LFG for 7 hours looking for the one key that they need for IO. They just want to be able to go do it, but they can't target it in any way. They just have to hope somebody else brings them into it if they don't have it themselves. So, hopefully this is, like I said, I think this is all good and like good steps in the right direction for this kind of stuff, but there are still some improvements I'd like to see. And yeah, that's my thoughts. So thanks for watching. See you later.